Hi, Matt. My name is Frank Eagar. I'm the Managing Director and CEO of Sovereign Metals. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Sovereign Metals itself. We have discovered not only the world's largest rutile deposit, but also the world's second largest graphite resource. We are planning and developing our story to become the world's largest rutile producer, but also the world's largest graphite producer.
I'll jump in there. Just to say, and also Sapan, you're in the background as well. So we hopefully talk a little bit of macro with you in a second. Frank, I wanted to catch up with you specifically because you've had your feet under the table for 3 months now. That's enough time to maybe go through the data, talk to the people, and understand what you've got. Is it everything you expected?
Absolutely, Matt. It's been quite a roller coaster. 3 months ago, it was pretty much, as we started the management sort of transition from Julian Stevens, who stepped back onto the board as a non-exec. It was pretty much me in country. Since then, we've really been able to appoint some senior people with long track records in mine build experience, on the ground social performance experience, and specifically on the ESG side. So it's been exciting. On top of that, we've made some great progress with getting the Rio Tinto relationship bedded down. We're working very well together with them. They often say that they are, or often tell people that they are a passenger here. They're a 15% shareholder, but they're certainly not leading the process. That's all up to Sovereign to do, and I think we're making some great strides as far as that's concerned. It's been a very fast-paced last 3 months, but we're certainly getting things moving. The project is taking on a life of its own, and we're getting into, when we spoke last time, we finished the PFS. We were getting into a PFS optimization phase. The teams that we've appointed in terms of, the technical guys, the mine building team, essentially making great progress in terms of this optimization. We had a little bit of, I guess, initially the market wasn't 100% clear in terms of what the optimization means. I think we've narrowed that down, to really look at specific technical elements that needed to be addressed in terms of the PFS, to further de-risk the project, to give Rio comfort that we're looking at the right things. Specifically in terms of, water usage is very important in any, mine development these days. Tailings storage and tailings handling. So we're focusing specifically on those things really to help, de-risk the project further from a technical perspective.
Right. Okay. Let me just jump in here again, if you don't mind. Right. People really had a good look at you when Rio came in. So $40 million for 15% as a strategic investor. As you say, you are the guys on the ground, driving this forward and looking to optimize. Optimize to me is about increasing not just getting the de-risking component sorted, but improving margins, right? It's big. Number one rutile, was it number one graphite and number two rutile? We got yeah? Globally?
Number one,
was it the other way around?
Well, it's going to be 50, more or less 50-50, but yes, both big on both.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned a few things there which are really, really important for you when you've kind of come in, and you must have sort of seen a few gaps, and you must have seen a few opportunities to kind of improve across the board. So people, I think, is number one, right? You're an advanced development story that needs to get into production. You're going to move from, raising dilutory money into actually getting into revenue. So in priority order, what's important for you to get right and get done, say, over the next 12, 24 months?
Well, it's really demonstrating that we have the owners team and the skills to drive the project towards ultimately development. Rio Tinto is great in name. They have a strong balance sheet. They have a large pool of talent, which they've given us access to. So there's a lot of goodwill and assistance from their side, which is very helpful. But we have to demonstrate that we as Sovereign can and ultimately will develop this project. We have a lot of support from the Malawian government. as you've noticed from the president's speech at the Sona. But
Oh, you got name checked there, didn't you? That was quite good to see.
Absolutely. It shows the support. It shows, but that to me has been one of the key things, is to appoint the right people, get the owners team structure right. We've appointed 12, 13 highly experienced people in the last, essentially 6-8 weeks. So it's been a flurry.
For what? To do what? What do they need to deliver for you?
They need to drive, the optimization of the PFS, leading into scoping of the DFS. There's obviously a lot of permitting that needs to be done in terms of environmental impact assessment, mining license application, community development agreements, social performance, stakeholder engagement. These are all important. I mean, these are critical elements of any development story. This is no longer just drilling a hole and doing the assaying and then moving on to another rig or another hole. This is investing into the communities, making sure that we have to ensure the social license here. Without community support, without doing things the right way, there's no ways this project is going to move forward. So and for that reason, we wanted to appoint some of the best people that's been around in the industry.
Right. So if I look at, obviously, Rio Tinto coming on board as a strategic investor is a great endorsement from one of the biggest mining companies in the world, right? You say, you've got something here, we like it, we want a piece of it, right? Great. You also got an endorsement from Rick Rule, one of the kind of Canadian investors that people like to follow. He's saying he likes and is invested in your project for all the right reasons here. Okay. So all good stuff. I think what people now want to know is, right, if this is a good story, which I think has been, if I look at, maybe Sapan can comment on this in a minute, but it's fairly kind of erratic share chart in the sense that not lots of ups and downs and so forth, but broadly moving sideways in this quite difficult market, which I think some people would count as a win. But how quickly can you move through the phases? How easy is it to try for you guys to actually demonstrate the economics of how this thing gets built and how it makes money? I mean, how are we in for another 24 months, 36 months? I mean, when do you get to FID?
Look, I think we've already demonstrated that it's feasible as part of the pre-feasibility study. We've done a number of very, well-structured studies, scoping study, pre-feasibility study over the last 2-3 years. We've done a lot of metallurgical test work. We've qualified the rutile with a number of, blue chip industrial entities. So I think we've demonstrated this project is feasible. Now it's about permitting and how quickly we can as you say, quickly we can get through this phase of the project. We can do this only as fast as we get the support from the government. We've got the people on the ground, we've got the cash in the bank, we've got the support from Rio. So we are essentially full scale busy with our permitting process. But having said that, we've established and bedded down a very strong technical working group that was established by the government. We've mentioned this last time when we spoke, but this is now starting to work. It's paying dividends. There's representation from each critical or important government department on this committee, and it's becoming, again, they're policing each other. If there's a document sitting on one department's desk, somebody will point a finger to that department and say, come on guys, let's go, we're not holding this project up. There is real tangible support coming from all levels of government, all departments. I mean, you can imagine the scale and the size of this project. We're going to touch every single legislation government department in Malawi, and everybody is on board. Nobody is essentially, everybody's trying to get onto this committee. It's a privilege to be on this committee because they can see what difference or what contribution this project will make to Malawi. So I mean, it's a breath of fresh air. Final investment decision. I'm personally targeting the end of next year for that, to get to that milestone. Some tell me it's optimistic, but I have a job to do, and our team is there, and we're operating. People are on the ground almost permanently now working on these, elements that I've mentioned. So the next big thing for us as part of the PFS optimization is a rehabilitation trial, a land rehabilitation trial. And that means we're going to dig a hole or a few holes, and we're going to fill those holes, and we're going to rehabilitate the land to demonstrate to the communities and the government that we can restore the land to, current and better standard of soil and ability to grow maize and improved yields. Now, as part of this phase or this trial, we will, it's a rehabilitation trial, but as part of the trial, we will collect data around, confirming hydraulic mining, dry mining, processing and separation of the various fractions of sand and slimes, and testing how the slimes behave and how the tailings can be managed and stored. We think that, the objective here is to inform the DFS and then move into that. And that we're hoping to have finished by July, August, and then the DFS or the engineering elements of the DFS essentially can start.
Right. Okay. I like these conversations because it's what we call internally big boy talk, where you're actually, advanced development conversations are really interesting because they're meaningful, it's real, it's partly because of the de-risking, but mostly the bit I like, which is demonstrating that this thing is financeable, right? Because that's for me near-term revenue, right? Part of that is going to be the types of conversations that you have and who with. Now, we were meant to meet up in Cape Town, but you were swamped with, I think, what you're telling me was the right type of meeting. So can you give us a sense of the types of companies and the types of conversations that you were having in Cape Town? And as I understand it, I know you're on a road show as well.
Look, I mean, we always talk about, and we don't have to convince people anymore that this is a tier one project. In terms of scale, size, longevity, carbon footprint, critical minerals, security of supply. And, Rio Tinto has put a stamp on it and said, we're a tier one company. We invested in this. This is a tier one project. And the types of people that we met, were of the same caliber. They were tier one companies, private, but also public institutions and agencies from the west to the east, predominantly outside of China. There's a lot of interest in the project from a sense of a secure source of supply, certainly of graphite. The rutile, essentially, I think we've demonstrated already before the Rio Tinto transaction that we had MOUs in place with large Asian and US customers. So, but certainly from a graphite perspective, there was a lot of interest from high level blue chip tier one institutions and countries. So from that perspective, it was very, very interesting and very positive.
Right. Okay. And Sapan, can I jump to you now? Because what must be music to your ears in terms of the people that are there to drive this optimization process or on board and coming on board, and that's going to make the numbers look more attractive. One hopes. If I'm looking at the marketplace at the moment, we've spoken to a lot of titanium companies recently, certainly the side of New Year's, all at different phases here. And they've kind of given me a sense of what they think the macro environment is like. And I don't mind if you've got a comment on the macro, which would be great. But I'm more interested in first mover advantage, in the sense that there are a lot of players out there at different phases, and the people who can get over the line soonest. Are they going to be the beneficiaries? Do they become a barrier for entry for those that fall behind? I mean, how do you read the market, Sapan?
Yeah, I think the first point to make is, we're a one project company, but there are two minerals coming out of it, both which have their own kind of macro overlay. So, the rutile, which is a high-grade titanium feedstock, ends up in a market. Whether it's pigments, whether it's welding, whether it's titanium metal, I mean, it's just a plethora of uses, and therefore hits all sorts of end industries, right? Many multi-billion-dollar industries. So that's, whether we're in a downturn or an upturn, it really doesn't matter. I may be selling less. Yeah, if I look at the titanium industry, I may be selling less rutile into the paints industry because we're not building as many, houses on a global basis. But at the same time, there's more use of titanium metal in the defense industry, for example, where fortunately, or however you take it, the world continues to kind of militarize itself. And as long as we're needing to put two sheets of metal together, we're always going to need welding. And if you're going to want to weld something, you're going to need rutile. So that's that game on that front. And then you've got the graphite, and again, graphite ends up in lithium-ion batteries, which we all know about, and electric vehicles, and we're all expecting electric vehicles to take off. But what have we seen recently? Especially out of China, we've seen EV sales haven't been as big as people expected. Now, here's the, no pun intended, the crux of the matter, which is when you're the lowest cost producer in both of these, I mean, you're essentially the last man standing, right? When the prices are good in both those industries, you're making more cash than anyone else. When prices are bad, you're hopefully still making cash. And if you're not, that means no one else in the industry is producing anyway. So it's that's essentially our USP. That's our competitive advantage over anyone else. You take graphite, for example. Our cost of production, incremental cost of producing a ton of graphite out of Kasiya would be about $180 a ton, right? Most of our peers would not be in business anywhere lower than $500-600 a ton graphite prices. Most PFSs, DFSs, studies that other graphite producers or developers have put out into the market, they're expecting prices up to $1,800-2,000 a ton for this stuff. And if you're selling something at $2,000 a ton and you're producing it at less than $200 a ton, it's a pretty good position to be in. So that's, we let the project do the talking when it comes to the macro. I think we're in a good enough position, largest producer, lowest cost producer, to really put ourselves in a basket of our own, and B, really hone in on that first mover advantage you talked about, because we have had those discussions with the end users, we have had those discussions with potential financiers and all those, and we continue to do so, and they all know about us. Kasiya was the first rutile dominant deposit to be found in 70 years. As soon as we put our hands up and said, hey, guess what? We found some rutile, and not just some rutile, but it's the biggest rutile ever found. You can imagine who was knocking on our door.
Just to add on to that, Matt, I mean, the graphite market is quite complicated, and not many people understand it. But, as Sap says, bottom of the cost curve, this is not our primary product. This is essentially a buy or a co-product. And, we're not in the position where we have to maximize flex size, to make the project feasible from a, economic perspective. We can produce at this very low cost, and we can be flexible with our end customers to, produce something which they really need and want. So, if we compare ourselves to other graphite projects, I think we're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, look, and I think I wouldn't put yourself down too much, Sapan, on the EV side of things. That sales were up 35% last year, which in any other sector would be good news, but perhaps it wasn't as bullish as we all thought. But with let's say with graphite, Frank, it's nearly 50% of a lithium-ion battery is graphite. I think perhaps people don't realize that, or maybe forget that. So exciting times coming forward. If I can just step back, Frank, because I'm trying to think from an investor's point of view in terms of where you're at. You're sitting as a, sort of somewhere between, 220 and 250, depending on the time of the day, million market cap, Aussie dollar market cap. this has got a long way to go in the sense that you think by this time end of 2020, sorry, by the end of 2025, you could be in an FID position. You're going to have advanced some of those conversations around financing, etc. PFS is good. Feasibility study. Can you give us a sense of the timing of that one? Because I think that can maybe firm up for some people because of contingent potential financing ability.
We have, the opportunity here to deliver on the ground activities. So that's certainly one thing which is going to be evident coming out of the next, 6 to, call it 9 to 12 months. In terms of, financing discussions, we've already started those with, various institutions. Like I mentioned, there's interest from levels on the planet, which, I think where the project and the size of the project and the scarcity of rutile and the criticality of graphite, has opened up doors from a number of avenues that not any other old project, sorry, not to be disparaging to other mining projects, but not any project is going to attract. So those discussions have already to some extent started, but there's a little bit of, on the ground activity that we need to demonstrate. We need to complete and progress optimization and firming up some of the assumptions that were made in the PFS, so we can move into DFS engineering and ultimately do and complete our permitting requirements. So, still I think from where we are trading, we should be multiples of where we are. But I think if we can deliver on what we are putting out to the market and do as we say, I think over the course of the next number of months, I think the share price and the value will respond accordingly. That's my sense.
Right. Okay. And for Sapan, one final one from you, if you don't mind, because I'm just trying to make sense of the market at the moment, which I think people are also struggling with, and certainly in terms of the price of some of the commodities in relation to this burgeoning gap between demand and supply coming forward. CO2, net zero, whatever people you want to label it, is going to be such a big factor for the EV sector, because they see that as a big part of their marketing, to be able to use the right sorts of molecules from the right source. You guys have got a low CO2 emission per tonne. What does that do for pricing? What does that do for negotiations and discussions around these commodities that go into these batteries?
So, look, I think let's take a step back, right? We all lived and breathed the big ESG kind of up and down, where everyone was pushing, those three letters and how their company conforms to it. What happens in these senses when we realize actually we can't just continue business as usual, is the policymakers jump in, and that's exactly what's happened here. And we've seen already in the EU this, I'm not sure if you're aware, but, if you're an industrial player in the EU, you're going to have to carbon account for everything now. So you're producing cars in the EU. Well, tell me what's the carbon footprint of your windscreen wiper, of your exhaust pipe. If you're producing EVs, what's the carbon footprint of that battery in there? And when you look back at where most of the graphite that ends up in electric vehicle batteries comes from, it's China. And most of it is actually synthetic rather than natural graphite. Now, the reality is if you want a premium type of lithium-ion battery, you're going to need both synthetic and natural graphite in there. The synthetic graphite, for every ton you're producing, you're putting 20 tons of CO2 emissions up the chimney stack. Kind of defeats the purpose of why you're building the electric vehicle in the first place. If you're doing that, we've done the work to show that a ton of graphite from Kasiya would produce 1% of those carbon emissions, so 0.2 tons of CO2 emissions, right? So automatically, if you're taking out some synthetic graphite and placing Kasiya's graphite into your battery, you're pretty much just mitigating the entire CO2 emissions for that part that then flows into your battery, which is, all well and good from a policy perspective, but this is really going to start hitting bottom lines of companies. And if you look at everyone from BMW, Boeing, Rolls-Royce, even Tesla, everyone is talking about working with their suppliers, working through their supply chains, and working out what those CO2 footprints look like, and then bringing them down, decreasing them as much as possible. Or if you're taking Kasiya's graphite, if you're taking Kasiya's rutile and using that in your end product, I mean, that is a very quick win in terms of saving yourself, all those greenhouse gas emission penalties that ultimately you're going to have to start paying.
See, I find that truly fascinating, because people, you guys have done it today. You said, look, we're one of the lowest quartile cost producer. Great. But there's the other side of that equation, which is the sales price, right? So one thing you control, the other thing you can't. But with things like this kind of CO2 component, if you're one of the lowest CO2 emitters per ton produced, that becomes very, very interesting in terms of the obtainable price from these, whether it be metal traders or contractors, because ultimately the EV companies demand, because their marketing is driven off of it, and will continue to with electric vehicles, the kind of the cleanest, greenest version of whatever it is that they're using. So I think that's fascinating when you guys get to that point, and when people are actually, when you get to the point of building pilot plants and letting people test your product, it'd be interesting to sort of get a firmer grip on what price you can achieve. Stretch those margins, but. Lots of things to do before then, Ghai. Lots
Absolutely.
of things to
Let's
not get ahead of ourselves, but I am excited in case you couldn't tell.
No, it's very exciting. It's really, things are moving up a notch, and it's great. We really, I think it's a nice position to be in. It certainly is the project ticks all the boxes. Everybody is excited to be part of it. Everybody wants to be part of it. And I think the more we educate the market, the more investors are going to want to be part of it as well.